There was also one shockingly younger man who's been alluded to many times in many videos in passing, but we haven't really talked about it in any depth. I want to open this discussion by reminding the audience that I've always emphasized fragility, the fragility of the unique person and what they're going through in this time of their life, as opposed to the age stamped on their passport, their birth date. You could know someone who is 21, who is much less fragile than someone else you know who's 31. You can know a 31-year-old who really is, emotionally vulnerable in a way where you have to be very, very careful about your relationship with them. And you might know a 21-year-old who's already had a lot of experience in life and is very self-confident and is really not fragile in the same way. So you first started to get obsessed with this younger man when he was 18.
Yes.
And in my opinion, when we talked about it, eventually, I only found out what was going on years later. I guess when he was 22 or maybe 21, I found out the history of this. Roughly. The exact timeline doesn't matter for the audience. But I basically found out in retrospect what you've been doing in secret. But whenever we talked about this, I always emphasized this particular guy is fragile. Like this is not a guy who at age 18, and then as the years go by, 19, 20, 21, because this went on for all these years. This is not a guy you can get involved with in this way. He was my friend. I didn't even want to talk to him about what was going on in my own sex life. I felt he was too fragile for me to be honest with, just man to man, just as a friend talking about what I'm going through.
Yeah. You have talked about the fragility of the other partner. And I know from even before I met you, what you had to say, I don't want to misrepresent you, and I don't want to get too off topic, but I think I did remember the age that you had come to was 23.
Yeah.
And I was 23. I remember. I was thinking,
Yeah, you were 24 when we met face to face.
Yeah.
But yeah. Yeah, 23 was not the minimum age for a sexual relationship. It was actually the minimum age for me to be honest with someone talking about politics. Interesting.
Oh, okay.
But who am I, am I going to have sex with someone and not talk to them about politics? But you've seen me in that situation with a few women where I meet a woman face to face and I feel like she's so fragile. In one case, because of her religious upbringing. We met a woman who was really raised a very religious way. Yeah. And it's like, whoa, I don't feel like I can have a conversation with this woman about politics or religion. Like, I don't want her to break down crying or something. I don't want to have some kind of terrible, terrible impact on her that way. So yeah, at what point do you stop kind of bullshitting someone about politics, about those kind of intellectuals, and just really tell them, you're wrong, And so for those kinds of conversations you've seen me have with men and women of all ages, I can be very rough. People can find it devastating to talk to me about politics. So for me, that's 23.
Okay.
Where it's like, okay, I'm going to really treat you as an adult in all ways. Right? Yeah.
I'm sorry I've perverted the memory.
Because
I was 23, I was thinking, and I was sexually fascinated by you, and yeah, I think I was remembering it in that way.
You already had designs to seduce me when you were 23, and that's right. And that puts it in perspective. You're 31 now. That's right.
Yeah.
But look, it has everything to do with my sex life, because why would I have a sexual relationship with someone whom I don't even feel comfortable talking to about politics?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's, again, if I literally am working as a porn star, there are circumstances in which you have sex with someone, you have sex with someone on camera, and it's totally dehumanizing. There is no intellectual component and there is no ethical component to it. But yeah, it's hard for me to imagine. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Well,
I regret the relationship that I was in when I first met this person. I first met my ex-boyfriend when I was 17. And it wasn't until I was 23 that I remember hearing what his perspective was on the 9/11 terrorist attacks.
Right.
And it just...
That was kind of a giveaway
I
for
was
what a
like-
schnook he was, what a schnorrer, right?
Yeah, it was really...
You just realize this guy is not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I understand, and I know what I was like when I was 18.
Right. What I was thinking about when I made that video so many years ago about the, age 23, what that kind of line means to me, what that cutoff means to me. I remember I met a young man on the university campus up at UVic, and he was basically repeating Nazi propaganda to me. I would say it was Nazi propaganda he might have learned on 4chan or on Reddit or something like, I don't know. But, he was a young man who was influenced by this kind of right-wing extremist thing. And because he was so young, in a very gentle, very friendly way, I was really letting him know. And then I stopped and reflected on that. I was like, okay, when does the bullshit stop? Now, I've met a lot of sexy females who are communists. There are a lot of good-looking women. I have not dealt with sexy women who are Nazis. I haven't. That hasn't been my experience. But I don't know. Maybe that'd be really hot. For those of you in the audience who don't know, I'm genetically Jewish, so maybe that's a little extra spicy. But when I meet left-wing women who are either outright communists or teetering on that extreme, okay, when does the bullshit stop? When do I talk to this woman the same way I talk to an adult man, just as rough, just as direct, just demolish her assumptions about politics and history? So for me, that's 23.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've seen that in person. I've seen you confront communists in person.
Which can be sexy. For the right woman, it could be really hot. I met this guy and he totally changed my views on Karl Marx and the history of socialism.
Yeah. Well,
go on.
Absolutely. I hope this is not inappropriate to say, but when you and I were first speaking with each other, the idea that you were going to transform me in this way was really hot to me. It was really sexy that I was just the possibility of being with somebody that was going to just make me completely see the world through a different lens. And I don't know what that says about me. I don't know if that's evil or good or what, but just that I was living in a rather indolent life.
Yes.
And self-indulgent life, a meaningless life. And that you were somebody that was telling me, I'm going to shake you out of that. I'm going to invigorate your life. I'm going to give you meaning. And
your life took on a kind of profundity and seriousness and sense of purpose as soon as you were with me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that age for me, I was learning more about veganism and just philosophy, history, politics. It is something that I had not prioritized in my life. And I definitely find fault in myself for that. So that is partly leading me to say why it is that I found this person who was only 18 so interesting. It was somebody who had been influenced by your philosophy, Eisel. So somebody who had decided he should become more educated. He should educate himself, not just rely on the school system.
I do not think we talked about the possibility of you having sex with him when he was 18. The first time that topic of conversation came up, I would guess he was 20. If I'm wrong, I don't have a perfect memory. But let's say he was 20. And from the very beginning, what I was saying to you was, you have to really think about the ways in which this is unethical or irresponsible, because the effect on him. Now, if you were a man and this was an 18-year-old girl, 19-year-old, 20, 21-year-old young woman, everyone would understand that right away. Be like, oh yeah, if you're an older man, seducing or making love to a young woman, you really got to think about the long-term consequences. And again, just by nature, I do. I do think about that for everyone. I could be involved with a 40-year-old woman, a woman in her 40s, and still this love affair is going to have a huge impact on her. I have to really be careful. So whether he was 20 or what, when I first started to kind of suspect what you had cooking, and again, I did not suspect even 1% of the depth of your obsession with this guy, what was going on with you behind the scenes, the extent to which this really was a sexual obsession that had took over your life or would take over your life. But when I first started to glimpse that, I was like, look, like, don't kid yourself. This particular guy, he is really fragile. Like, there is no way you can expect him to deal with this, especially, the details of this relationship. So this is a guy who admires me. He has watched my YouTube channel since he was 14, right? So in terms of his development, I'm someone he has looked up to. He's listened to my philosophy. He's been influenced by my YouTube channels from the ages of 14 to 20, right? You are someone he's seen on camera. He relates to you as a famous person. So I know exactly, maybe from the ages of 16 to 20 for him, right? You are a kind of celebrity to him, but you're a celebrity directly connected to his political ideology. Put it that way. I mean, it's way more powerful, your role in his life, than someone who just sings rock and roll or something, And, the particular guy, I have a sense of his character. I've talked to him for many years. I do not think he is someone who could roll up to a hotel room, bang you out in front of me while I'm sitting in the corner. He is not a guy who could do that at age 18, 19, 20, 21, or even 22. That's not who he is. And I mean, I know you don't think of yourself as an intimidating person, but you've seen that. Like, even this month, like within the last month, you have seen how intimidating it is for men. Like, men realize what your intellectual expectations of them are, right? And you communicate that to them. Mm-hmm. And men feel like, okay, I can't do this. Like they just can't deliver. Men realize what your sexual expectations of them are, right? Or just what you're used to, what your prior sexual experience is. And men think, oh God, I can't do this. So for me with women, that's not really a problem. Like, it's not like these women look at me and think they have to make some huge effort in the bedroom or something. I mean, if you were making video, just say, imagine all the women who put the message out there that their boyfriend is stupid and lazy and boring and bad in bed and has a small penis. You have been putting the message out consistently for 7 years, that I have a huge cock, I'm amazing in bed, you routinely have more than 100 orgasms a day. If we eat bean burritos and we have indigestion all day, then but there have been days when you had more than 200 orgasms, and we've recently actually kept track for just one day, and you were way over 200 that day.
Yeah.
You have this amazing sex life with your primary partner, and your primary partner is a very intellectually intimidating person. Right. And I know it's you yourself. You also are an intellectually intimidating person to these dudes, to this kind of man. To the men. To 99% of men you can find,
Yes, it is true. From the start of my relationship with you, I have publicly stated just how satisfying my sex life is with you.
Right.
And yeah, more recently we've been open about this. Yes, there was a day just a few days ago where we had sex 9 times, and I think I had over 200 orgasms.
Right.
That is an extraordinary day.
Right.
But even on days where we're busy with other things,
yes,
we're still having amazing sex. So yes, I can see how that is.
I can remember
to other people.
I can remember days when we were very busy and we just barely had time to have sex 3 times, and it was still fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's something that we've talked about privately, but just like even sex that is not
right. Well, I think
not an occasion, it's still really amazing.
I think for you and me both, no, I do mean this as a comment. I really think it is something in common. For you and me both, sex is part of the life of the mind. It's not just the life of the body. And in the same way that you and I would never feel like, okay, I have read enough books. Like that, well, I just know everything I need to know.
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
Or right. Also, we've never written enough books. We've never made enough YouTube videos. We've never, what we can produce. Like, no, like sexually also, there is no enough.
Yeah.
You can't have enough people who love you and care about you in your life. You can't have enough orgasms, frankly. But no, I really get that about you, and I'm not a hypocrite about it. So on the day I had sex with you 9 times, that just got mentioned, the day before yesterday. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I had sex with you 9 times. How many other women was I mastering that day? just being real. I think 3.
I think 3.
Yeah, I think there were, and all 3 of those women. Anyway, whatever. They're they're a plausible option for me, whatever you want to say. It's
Yeah.
not, So, yes, I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I'm this kind of very rapacious intellectual.
Yeah.
And in the same way, I'm this very rapacious, very ambitious person,
Yes, I think
Yeah.
that is something I love about you, that you're so passionate.
Yeah.
And you have this, rapacious desire for intellect as well. It's not just sex,
Right.
and I think that was part of why it was so exciting when I first met you, that it wasn't just sex. Yes, the sex was a revolution for me. It was like a whole new
Yep.
world for me. But everything was, intellectually, physically, I was learning how to exercise, really. Lift weights
that's
for
true.
The first time, all this
It was a
stuff.
body transformation for you inside and out, and it was an emotional transformation, psychological transformation.
Yeah, it just felt.
I mean, I don't want to. I mean, I don't need to put a fine number on it, but I remember you saying to me that you had more orgasms with me in your first month, the first month of our relationship, than you had in like your entire life up to that point.
I was talking about my.
With your
Right,
boyfriend,
yeah,
right?
with
That
my
your boyfriend before the only boyfriend you had before me, all the orgasms he'd given you in your relationship didn't add up to as much as what you and I did together in that first month, which is And we, to be fair, we had a ludicrous amount of sex, ludicrous number.
Yeah.
So look, I think, wittingly or unwittingly, I've led you through contextualizing for the audience why it would be a really bad idea for you to invite an 18-year-old boy into our sex lives. I mean, what a minefield. Like, it's very hard to imagine an 18-year-old man who could cope with.
I know. It's part of the tragedy of life that when you watch porn,
Right.
many of the men and women in porn are 18 years old, and much of the porn I've seen is of young men. Not all of it, but yes, much of the porn that is
Right.
on offer at any given time.
And the people in porn, like the 18-year-olds in porn, they don't talk much. You don't hear how ignorant and stupid and emotionally fragile they are, right? This is an their very silence is an aspect of the aesthetic of erotica.
Yes, and I myself, as we've now talked about in other videos, I myself was filming myself having sex when I was
when you were 18, right?
So,
right.
Yeah, different.
Let me just ask another specific phase. How old was Leonore when she started to hit me up, as they say?
23.
Okay, so she's the perfect example. Mm-hmm. So Leonore is 23, or she was 23 at that time. Mm-hmm. I would say Leonore is more immature than this guy we're alluding to when he was 18, 19, 20.
I would agree.
Right.
I would agree with that.
I would say Leonore was more fragile than this guy. Mm-hmm. And I picked up on that. I felt it. And that's why I did not reciprocate. I did not pursue her sexually. I decided very early on, I talked to her a little bit, and I thought, okay, this person is really...
I would definitely agree with you about the maturity, but I think I have to think a bit more about fragility.
Okay.
I'm just not sure, but definitely in some ways fragile, ego-wise. Yes.
Okay, so let me talk through a specific scenario. Let's say you meet a man who is 20 years old, and he is in the hotel room with you and I. We're just going to say hotel room to simplify. Okay? And he tries so hard to give you an orgasm, and he's just terrible at it. I mean, you either don't have an orgasm or you just kind of barely have one or something.
Yeah.
Right? And then whatever, he steps aside, he gives up, maybe even loses erection, whatever. I mean, whether he has an orgasm or not himself, he gives up. And then he gets to step aside and watch you and I making love. Mm-hmm. So you see, that may not sound traumatic. I mean, for you as a woman, it's hard to relate to because women don't have the same role in terms of performance and sex.
I am imagining it from the man's
He
perspective.
could really be scarred for life.
Yes.
Where it's like, whoa, this dude just totally outclassed me. I just saw this dude give the woman 20 orgasms effortlessly, whereas the younger man tried so hard to get one orgasm out of you and it was terrible and awkward and what have you.
Yes, I can see that being traumatizing. I can see that being something that
No, I just
I would not want to inflict on somebody else. So
Right, and that's probably not what you had planned.
No.
That's not what you invited him to do. But with a younger person, with a fragile person, you got to think about it. You saw me have a long conversation with a man. He was over 30. This guy was a communist, getting a PhD in history. You know who I mean. And he was just so emotionally devastated by this conversation he had with me.
Absolutely. He was
Right.
demolished by that conversation, and he was, he
Right.
was licking his wounds after the fact and was talking with his wife about
Yes.
it. And, his wife was
Yeah.
cross with eyes all the same.
Yeah.
It was
And
very obvious.
all I did was outclass him.
Yes.
I
Intellectually.
just outclassed him. So in terms of what causes men misery and what men are fragile to, right? I think it is different from women. So again, this is a digression, but I think it's a useful one. Even if in your imagination it seems to you challenging for me to have sex with a woman who has larger breasts than you, if the three of us are in a hotel room together, I don't think it's challenging to you at all. And if
No.
anything,
Yeah.
if anything, I think you'd be turned on by it. You'd love to be in bed with a woman who had large breasts.
Yeah.
Right.
Imagining that scenario with an imaginary 20-year-old man in the bedroom with you and me, where he can't get me to orgasm, and
Right.
you can seemingly effortlessly.
Right.
That I can imagine from the man's perspective. I am not a man myself, but I can imagine how that would be traumatizing. That would be something that he would remember for a long time, and it might really upset him. For me, as a woman in the bedroom with you and a woman with larger breasts,
Right.
it's not that I see you having so many orgasms with that woman instead of me. I could imagine it being upsetting if you seem totally different than you do with me. If you were to I don't know, just be expressing yourself differently with this woman and saying things openly, I could see it being upsetting in some ways. I've missed having sex with women with large breasts this whole time that I've been with Melissa. She has a flat chest, and look at me, Melissa. I'm fucking this woman who has larger breasts. I'm sticking my cock in her breast or whatever. Whatever the situation.
I think that would also turn you on. But go on, yeah.
I think I would have, especially at my age right now at 31, I would have a really positive attitude to that, honestly, and knowing how it is that you really feel about me.
Right.
I know you, I trust you, I love you, and so
Right.
And ultimately, I do want, it turns me on to see you turned on. It turns me on to see you happy and excited. So I think I would still feel turned on and excited too. And if I'm attracted to the woman, then that's hot for me too. So yes, it's a different scenario. And when I'm thinking of a heterosexual younger man not being able to
But
get as much of a response from me as you can, then that being bad.
Right. And, again, for men, it's about performance. It's about virtue, right? It's about, and for women, it's not. I just say this is partly cultural, but I'll be real with you. I think it's the same in every culture. Men are not proud if their wife is really good at sucking cock. Men are not proud of a woman for having a lot of skill. If you're with a woman and she's amazingly skilled at sucking cock, the suspicion is, what did you do? What did you do with your 20s or something? Again, it's all that stuff. Oh, are you a slut? Are you a whore? What's wrong with you if you're really skilled at sex as a woman? And with men, it's very much the opposite, right?
Yeah.
That there's something wrong with a man if he's not really, really skilled at sex.
Yeah, it's a double standard that I hate. I knew of that from a young age. I don't want to get too off topic, but there was this one year that for Christmas I was spending time with my family, and we were at a bookstore, and I was walking around the bookstore with one of my brothers, and it's not really showing a lot of sibling affection, but I just asked him, straight up, is there a book that you'd be interested in that I can get you as a gift for Christmas?
Right.
And this book was basically, I didn't look through it at the bookstore. I just picked up the book. And then as I was wrapping it the night before Christmas, I was reading through it a little bit. And it was a book which to me is basically pickup artistry. It's a book about, how to get laid, how to seduce women that you're not really trying to have
Right.
a long-term relationship with. And it was, quite shocking to me. And I remember I wrote a little note in this just to my brother saying, like, look, I really hope you don't treat women this way. Like, this is really disturbing to read. I only read a couple pages, but I know the expectation is that men should have this amazing performance in bed.
Right.
Even though to get that experience, you either have to have a lot of sex with a small number of partners or
Right.
a lot of partners,
Right.
one-night stands. And, I don't think that's really fair.
So,
I
I have the experience of having sex with a woman in her 30s, and I am the best sex she has ever had in her life.
Right.
And I don't mean I'm 10% better than the other men she's had sex with. I mean I'm more than 100% better. It's incomparable. It's this paradigm shift. It's, oh, wow, she didn't even know what sex was like before she had sex with me. That's my experience with women. So I've done that with women in their 30s. I guess, women in their 20s too. I'm sorry, just thinking back. What I have to be careful about with a younger woman, if I had sex with a woman who was 18, 19, 20, 21, well, what is the effect going to be like on her? So I've never been with a virgin. I never want to be with a virgin.
Right.
All of my experiences with women, and whether they've had 10 sexual partners before me or 100 sexual partners before me, or they have had more than 100 sexual partners before me, it's women saying, oh my God, you are the best sex of my life. You are the best sex I've ever had in my life. This totally changes the way I view kind of the philosophy of human sexuality.
Yeah.
Right. But, and that is devastating. I'm just being real with you. I think the emotional effect for a lot of these women, like, obviously it's positive in some ways, but like.
Yeah, no, and I've been through that where I had only had sex with one partner prior to meeting you.
Right.
I knew this was...
But it was a long-term relationship, so you'd had sex with many, many, many times.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yes, I had sex with him many times, but having sex with you was just indescribably better.
Right.
In every way. I had really grown accustomed to being with somebody who was lazy and fat. Yeah. And I was now with a guy who was very just passionate and actually the act of lovemaking, the act of performance, like that you were very active and, giving and, I had not,
and I got results. I mean, the number of orgasms you having was enormous and so on. It clicked.
Yeah. So, sure. Yeah. I see how, that can be damaging to the woman in some ways or destroy what they thought about sex beforehand and like, oh wow, I wasted all that time with all these other guys that couldn't please me, and I thought there was something wrong with me.
That's exactly what I was going to say next.
These women, like, that they thought.
That's what I hear getting here for these women is what's devastating is they reflect that they thought there was something wrong with them. They thought they had a psychological problem. They thought they had a physical abnormality that they could barely have an orgasm or couldn't have orgasms at all before they met me. And then they meet me and I make love to them and they realize all of a sudden, whoa, it was just the wrong key going into the lock. Like this guy has what it takes. And all the other men they've been with, whether it's 50 or 500, that none of them did. So that is one kind of paradigm shift. Okay, but what if you are in the role of the man, in this case, a shockingly younger man, being asked to step up and make love to Melissa in this incredibly intimidating context, right?
It's a big ask.
So, all right. This has been a great video already. What happens if I make love to an 18-year-old woman? And again, let's say the same scenario. She meets us in a hotel room. You're there also. And then as the years go by, she gets back in touch with me, by email or whatever, Facebook message, and she's saying, "Look, I have a new boyfriend now, but it's not the same as it was with you. I have this new boyfriend who's also the same age she is, but he can't make me come the way you can. The sex is nowhere near. Of course, she has this new boyfriend, but intellectually, it's not like it was when I was with you. When I was with you, we spent 12 hours together talking about history and politics. Now I'm with this boyfriend who drives a Ford 150 pickup truck and, has bumper stickers about voting for Donald Trump or whatever. She's putting up with, now I have a boyfriend who watches sports on TV and has nothing intelligent to say, the impact I could have on a younger woman, whether she is 18 or 28, 28 is still a lot younger than I am, right? Where I then make this impression on her about what's possible sexually, intellectually, and emotionally.
Yeah.
That she then carries the memory of for the rest of her life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have had to think about that with very beautiful younger women who were trying to get with me.
Yeah.
And so these younger women trying to get with me, they were very sexually self-confident. They would not have even tried if they didn't have a pretty high level of self-confidence. But they're going into that with the assumption like, oh, this is no big deal. This is just like fucking some teenage guy I met at a bar in a one-night stand. And I know they're wrong. Like, I know if they get into bed with me, it's something totally different for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It would have had a big impact on the younger women I'm thinking of.
Right.
Both intellectually and sexually. I actually think I did see a photo of one of those women's boyfriends, and sorry, you're objectively more handsome.
Yep.
And probably objectively more brilliant. I feel pretty confident
in
saying that. So.
And look.
That would be, yeah.
Yeah, people got to find somebody to love,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, other people have redeeming qualities as well.
Yeah.
I know that. It's not that But sure, yeah, you have to think about the impact that you would have on somebody who's 18 or somebody who's 28. And I know you also think of the impact that you'd have on me. I know you're thinking ethically, what is the right thing to do in each of these scenarios. And I know what you actually did in practice. There was nothing wrong, nothing improper. Even if these were beautiful women, you were primarily interested in the intellectual side of the relationship, what you could do together intellectually.
Right. Which is also kind of sick and twisted and fucked up. I just say, I'm self-critical. The fact that something is intellectual doesn't mean it's pure, But yeah.
I agree.
I've been out here trying to have intellectual relationships with women, and most of them just don't have anything intellectual to offer me. Mm-hmm. So that creates a very strange kind of tension where, it's like you're asking someone to do a striptease, and they're like, here, am I smart enough for you? Am I smart enough for you now? Am I intellectual enough for you? And the answer for me is always no. It's always no, take off another piece. It's always no, strip down further and reveal how smart you are intellectually. So I do see how that's really hard for women to cope with.
Yeah, and I know also some aspects of this include what is your role, Isel? What do you want from a relationship?
Right.
And what does the other partner want from the relationship?
Right.
You have to think of both sides. And do you want to always be in the position of teaching other people? No. I think you also want somebody to care enough about you to try to teach you something. And I sympathize with your position. I haven't consistently sympathized with that. I haven't always been able to see it that way because I see you're somebody who's so brilliant. How am I supposed to feel pity, when you are so vastly superior in intelligence to everybody else I know? But it's lonely when you're in that position and nobody is making that effort to talk to you about issues that you care about because they're intimidated by you. They think if you have a conversation with them, you're going to, like you, Weisel, will outclass them.
Right.
I don't envy your position that way.
And you've seen me being really friendly to people, and still it has this kind of shocking effect on them to realize they're out of their depth in this kind of conversation.
Yeah, so I was in the position all the time with you, and
right.
in my relationship with you, of being outclassed intellectually, and the idea of speaking with somebody who wanted to be an intellectual, I felt not that I was his superior. I felt that, if anything, we
right.
were equal on
this 18-year-old guy, this 20-year-old guy.
And like you said, intellectual doesn't mean pure.
So with your relationship with this guy, age 18 to 21, that is so true. The fact that it was an intellectual relationship does not mean it was pure. Yeah. It was pretty sick and twisted. Go on, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the fact that he was your friend, the fact that he had, been influenced by your philosophy, makes it that much more twisted. Yeah.
Say this. One of the guys you were involved with, I'm intentionally not going to say which guy. Mm-hmm. He has a really ugly wife. She's ugly in every way. Her face is ugly. Her body is ugly. She's out of shape. He has a really ugly wife. And you never met him and had sex with him.
No.
But he was one of these guys you had messages with. I think it is easy for you to imagine that guy, even though he acts like it's cool, he acts like it would be no big deal if you guys met up and had sex. What if he has sex with you and you are the best sex of his life? Like inside and out in every way. What if you are more beautiful than his wife? Like, that. Like, it's just obvious. So you're not, but let's say he has sex with you and it's not just that you're more beautiful. Like, the actual experience of the sex is so much better than his wife. It's so much better than any woman he's been with before. And now all his priorities change and he views his whole life differently. So for me, if I am involved with a woman who's 31 years old, if I'm involved with a woman who's 41 years old, she may be a woman who's in an open relationship. Her husband is cool. But now she's slept with me. Now everything looks different in retrospect. Now she reevaluates the relationship she has with her husband, right?
Yeah. I mean...
And that's partly intellectual.
Yeah, no,
right.
I mean, you've described relationships with women in which they feel they can't go even one day without having sex with you.
Yes.
And it totally has to transform their lives, that, like, once they've had sex with you, it's like, they can't stop. And I myself had been, I remember after there was a period of time in which we weren't having sex and I was losing it. I was completely out of my mind. And so, I know what it's like to be on the other side of that.
I can remember that. I remember talking to the friend of mine where I was like, look, for the first time, I've really wondered if sex addiction can really be like drug addiction. Because, like, I saw you go through withdrawal. We stopped having sex just a couple of days and you went completely insane. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can imagine, even if you have sex with a woman, you, Weisel, if you have sex with a woman who is in an open relationship,
they think it's all cool. They've done it before. She's met up and had sex with others before, and it's no big deal.
Yeah, the sex between you and this woman is consensual, ethical. Everybody's informed. Everybody knows. Still, when she has sex with you, it's a big change for her, and she now changes her priorities. She maybe will tell her husband, "I want to have more of a regular relationship with this guy," and
it can lead to divorce. It can totally turn her life upside down.
Lead to divorce. Could lead to her leaving her husband to be in a three-way relationship with us.
It could just lead to her cheating, even though she's in an open relationship, where all of a sudden she's breaking the rules. She's lying to me as well as the other guy.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, yes, that's partly because of the sex itself, which we've already talked about, whether it's a blessing or a curse. I'm good at sex. Get over it. It's not a lot of things I'm good at, guys. I don't have a great singing voice. But the intellectual component of it, I just want to briefly mention. A lot of the women who reach out to me. So a woman who was infatuated with me many years ago, and she's not anymore, but there was a woman who was infatuated with me many years ago. Before she knew me, she was married to a guy who was a sports journalist. Like, he wrote newspaper articles about baseball and hockey. And the guy just wasn't intellectual at all. She had been with a series of boyfriends. I forget if some of them she married, but she'd been with a series of boyfriends who were like played guitar in a band. And, you know, obviously these guys were in some ways attractive, but they were not intellectual at all. And from the first time she started talking to me, she was saying, look, you are exactly the kind of guy I was trying to find all my life. I was trying to connect with someone more like you, intellectually, politically. In her case, you know, also my background in museums and art. Like, there were all these other aspects in terms of how sophisticated I am, my background and stuff.
Right.
I was what she was looking for intellectually her whole life, and what these other men had failed to provide her with. Yeah. So now you've got another kind of conflict. And she was in an open relationship. Her and her husband both had other sexual partners during those years. But don't kid yourself. You know, if she gets into bed with me, you know, it's a whole different, you know, it's a whole different set of risks, you know. And I'm just being honest, I forget how old she was, but she was over 30. I mean, whatever. She was well over 30. So yeah. Go on, yeah.
So I agree with you. That would have, I don't know what would have happened. You know, I can't predict. I can't know exactly. But sure, I think that the intellectual factors there that you're describing,
right,
of her always looking for a guy who was sophisticated, was an intellectual, somebody who knew about art and history, you know, that would have a big impact on her, even if for whatever reason, like sexually, it's not the best she's ever had.
Right.
You know, she's so sexually experienced, but still, you know, I can see that having a big impact on her emotionally and intellectually and just, on a deep level.
Right.
So, and I think, you know, whether or not somebody is attracted to you physically it also ties into whether they're attracted to you and your voice, what you say, and obviously this particular example, this is somebody who had watched you for many hours, who knew your voice,
right,
who knew your perspective on life, you know. So, I mean, I just find it very appealing it's very attractive, Isol, that I'm with somebody that can keep me in check, because and now especially I can reflect and talk about the last 7 years with you, but also much of my life. I have always needed people to keep me in check. I don't know how else to say it. Like
put you in touch with reality again.
Yes, because I can
you can go into a kind of dreamy state.
I have a very active imagination. I have a very high sex drive. Like, I'm very passionate, and like I just have a lot of thoughts, feelings that are not fully rational, and I can't really express them rationally. And so for a lot of my life, I was very quiet and you know, didn't express them to everybody, in part because like I knew if I did open up, you know, like I can think of one example where I went to a friend's house. I was in a band with him. I went to his house when I was, I think, 16. Yeah, I had my driver's license, so I was 16. And we were trying to come up with lyrics. We were in a band together. We were trying to come up with lyrics for a song. And he was like, just write whatever's on your mind. And it was like multiple pages. Things that were on my mind. Like, it's just a lot that I had there. And yeah, some of them were feelings, but some of them were just like, you know, a bit more,
death threats? What? I don't know.
No, just, not death threats. Just poetic, you know, like things that are kind of wonky, you know, like not. It was abstract, you know, thoughts and just different, wording and terminology than you'd expect from, because I was trying to come up with lyrics. I was just trying to come up with something that's artistic and, I don't know, representative of the feeling that I had at that time. So yeah, I do recognize I'm a bit kooky, you know. I'm not as rational and clear-headed as men, so I've always been attracted to that in men, like, and I've even been attracted to that in women, like when they can keep me on an even keel.
Yeah, true.
Really just appreciate that and like crave that and need that to function. So you are like, I don't know, for me, kryptonite. Like, it's like you are very
kryptonite in a good way.
Yeah, in a good way. Like, you are very rational, and like you're able to like very quickly see, and you also know me very well. So like when I start to say something that I think I have a point, I think I'm coming to some kind of conclusion, got some things going on, cooking up in my brain, you're like, look, Melissa, I know where you're going with this. No, I have to stop you in your tracks. Let's not waste any time here because I can't just get off track. And you've often said, like, look, if you respect me, Melissa, like, stay on topic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, I have this problem, so I really need somebody who's like, if you want to call it masculine, but like dominant and that'll. So that I gotta say, like, I mean, although it's not the same for this particular guy, this particular guy did seem skeptical. He did seem to be able to kind of see which things were my mind game, or like, I felt like he could kind of see through me in certain ways. That is my totally abstract reasoning through this. He just seemed like he could keep me in check that way.
This guy, 18 to 21.
I know it seems ridiculous, and that
no, I'm interested to hear that. I mean,
it is pathetic. Somebody who's younger than me, I should be able to have that advantage. Like, oh, okay, I'm a wise older person. I should have my shit together. Well, no, it seemed like he really had his shit together a lot better than I did. He was able to read and write book reviews, and he was able to gather his thoughts, make videos talking about what he'd read. Not saying they're the most brilliant videos, not saying the most brilliant book reviews, but yeah, when I would read one of his essays, I was thinking, wow, I couldn't have written that when I was 18. That's just how I felt. I was like, just impressed.
Right.
Okay, other people might not be. That's fine. Maybe I have too low of standards for myself. Maybe I did have too low of standards for myself. Absolutely. Should have held myself to a higher level. And of course, ethically, what is the right thing to do in my position as an older person who's supposed to be, he's explained, he hoped that I could be an intellectual, maybe not.
Yeah.
Just a force for,
You know now, even just by looking back at your own writing, you know how crazy and out of control you are.
Yeah.
You know how dangerous you are in a lot of ways, right? So to invite someone into your life who is 18, 19, 20, if again, just given that you have that self-knowledge, you're aware of how much harm you've done to me while professing emphatically that you love me and that I'm your highest priority, still the real cruelty you've shown towards me, the real malice, the real harm you've done to me, right? So you know that about yourself. You know that about your track record. How can you then turn to a kid, 18, 19, 20 years old, as these years go by, and think you're going to pounce on him, you're going to drag him into your depraved, polyamorous, middle-aged life?
Yeah, no, it was wrong. It was the wrong move. So many wrong decisions, and especially after, you and I had a Skype call with him, when he asked to have a Skype call with me, just one-on-one. Absolutely, I should have just said no. Like, no.
Agreed.
I have things that I have to accomplish, and we can kind of.
Well, right, but there were two reasons.
Relationship, but I'm not your best friend. I'm not your lover. It should have been very clear what it was that I was.
But there were two reasons for you to say no. One is because he is fragile, but the other is because you are fragile.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you've seen this. You went completely insane.
Yep.
And not for a short time.
No, and it ruined all of 2023.
Yeah.
The entire year was.
You had a sexual obsession with this kid that ruined your life, and it would not be an exaggeration to say ruined my life, for at least one full calendar year. Yep. You could probably round up.
2 years.
Yeah.
2 years,
I would say a year and a half or even 2 years, depending. But I mean, there were so many other things you did that ruined my life. There were other men you cheated on me with, etc. There were other problems. But I would say like a year and a half. So even if you live to be 100, this is a significant chunk of your life that you ruined obsessing over this kid. And it's a significant chunk of my life.
No, and the whole time it was like, oh, it's good because it fits into the things that I want to do. It fits into me trying to be an intellectual. It fits into me trying to study Chinese.
But if I were doing that with a 19-year-old girl, you would laugh at that excuse. If there were a hot 19-year-old girl and I was on the phone with her for like 12 hours, you'd be like, Zell, are you kidding yourself?
Yes. No excuse, no justification. wrong.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
100%.
Melissa was doing voice recordings.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
that now, but
Right.
I'm just saying that and examining
Totally
how
good.
it was that I let myself spiral so far
Right.
out of control. That was it.
So Melissa has added up the number of hours she spent recording voice messages with this guy and having voice calls with this guy and video calls with him. None of which were nude, by the way. We should specify. She did not send him any naked pictures. She did not masturbate on camera. She did not do any cam horror activity. She wanted to. So you actually fantasized about that, and you recorded cam horror material for him, like videos and pictures that you just kept in your hard drive and never sent. So that was a fantasy you had, was of escalating this relationship with the younger guy to be more like your other cheating relationships. That was something you thought about.
I didn't want to. It was just, I didn't actually want to have that kind of relationship with him. I did not want to repeat the same mistake that I had made with Abhishek. So, no.
But on the other hand, I've actually seen these videos and I've seen what you wrote on in your own diary at the time, like your own writings in your. So it's one thing for you to say you didn't want to, but there is actually palpable evidence that is exactly what you wanted to do. So,
but no, okay. I'm sorry. It may not make sense.
Right, I get it.
Maybe it only makes sense in my mind, but like the distinction between, yes, I wanted to see this guy naked. I wanted him to see me naked.
Right.
I didn't want it to be virtually. I wanted it to be in person.
Right.
Because I had made this mistake.
Okay, but the same fantasy and the same, that was grinding away, and you were taking naked pictures of yourself and masturbating and filming yourself masturbating, thinking about him to some extent.
And I think, unfortunately,
you just didn't send it to
kind of seduction was sublimated into these voice recordings.
Right.
You know,
So I just want to say though, but we could actually get the numbers. The number of hours you spent recording voice messages for this guy, having Skype calls with this guy, voice calls with this guy, video calls with this guy, it's an unbelievable number of hours. And then the number of hours you spent writing things to him, writing things for him, writing things about him, reading things for him and with him. Nobody in the audience would believe how many hours this was. This took over your life, I would say for 12 months, for a full calendar year. And that's why you got no other reading done. You got no other work done. You didn't learn a language. You didn't find a career. And you didn't do any of the things for me that you promised to for me. You broke all your promises to me. So in some ways, this was a much more extreme addiction than you're cheating on me with the other men. Even though it was more intellectual. It was covertly sexual.
You've described some of my behavior as like slavish devotion. And I do think that was going on there. Which is very disturbing because it's not like he was asking me to, that kind of devotion.
This is also a paradox. You wanted to be inferior to him, and you're not, and the irony is what people have always said is that like supposedly the tension in our relationship is that you don't want to be inferior to me. Right? It's like, but no, that slave, slave fetish, what do you want to say, slave mentality side of your character, right? It's really there. Yeah. It really shows in basically your failed relationship with this guy, your attempt to have an relationship.
No, complete failure. It's embarrassing just how...
You were saying to him these slavish, submissive things all the time. I've seen 2 different points where you said to him,
thank you for listening to me. It means so much.
Okay, that you said hundreds of times. That you said thousands of times.
That so much.
Yeah, that you said. But I was going to give the example of you told him, if I ever saw you in person, I would faint. It would just be so like you look up at this guy, this kid, 19, 20-year-old kid, as if he is a rock star, as if he's your idol. And if you ever saw him in person, you would faint. I saw you say that to him twice. It's possible you said it 3 or 4 times if I go through the record of all these messages. But that's some really crazy
shit.
Slave master BDSM shit you had going on, which he's such a young kid. He couldn't understand it at all.
No.
It was totally baffling to him. No. Your like erotic obsession with him. Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine he just saw me as somewhat crazy girlfriend to somebody that he admired and basically worshipped as his hero philosophically, intellectually for his whole adolescence and early adult life.
No. So, when you look back at the last 7 years, it's like at every single stage I told you the right thing to do. We talked about this stuff explicitly before you made these decisions. And you made the conscious choice to not do what I told you to do, to instead do the wrong thing. Like every single one of these decisions, like not just cheating on me per se, but like the decisions surrounding them, they were things you and I talked about for at least 1 hour each. And you like agreed with me. You're like, oh yeah, that's a good point. I agree with you. And then you went ahead and made the decision to do the wrong thing, which in retrospect, you see what a disaster.
Yeah, you had forbid me from talking to him anymore because it had taken up so much time. I mean,
Right.
completely understandable why you would.
Yeah.
Any man would
Right.
if
and
he saw how
you
many
were
hours
you
I
were
was-
concealing me. It really was a form of cheating. You were concealing me. You were concealing from me the number of hours it took. You were sneaking away to have voice calls with him or record messages with him, and you were completely lying to me about what you were doing at your computer.
Right.
Because again, you spent hours and hours writing these messages. Even if he didn't realize that, even if he thought you spent 5 minutes writing something, you were sitting there for an hour doing these written compositions. Like so, hours and hours in the writing. You're lying to me about what you're reading or what you're writing at your computer and so on. You know, there's this. It really is a bizarre form of cheating that took over your whole life for those years. You know, first with one man, then with another. It wasn't just this kid. If people watch your other videos, they hear about the other men and the different forms it took. But yeah, no, I mean, you know, ultimately, I knew what was going on, and you had really already ruined your own life. I'm sure, but the impact in your life already at that stage, it was like, well, Melissa, here's what you were supposed to have accomplished in the last several years. It's all a disaster now. I mean, at that point, it was like you have a very short period of time to get your act together under so many headings: career, education, language learning, what it is you're going to tell your father you're doing with the rest of your life. You were going back to see your dad again. There was this kind of deadline coming up. And also, you'd completely ruined your relationship with me. It was like, look, you know, that's why I gave you a checklist. I was like, look, here is what you need to do in the next 6 months for our relationship to continue. That's how much you neglected and destroyed your relationship with me.
I was fucked up. My life
Yeah.
was fucked up. I should not have, like, this person.
And this 18-year-old kid, he can't be blamed. Between the ages
No,
of
not at all. No.
between the ages of 18 and 21, he wasn't seducing you.
No, I
You
want
know?
to make it clear.
Yeah.
It is my fault, 100%.
Yeah.
I was a fucked up person. I should not have even
Right.
talked to this person. I should have realized, look, this
how-
guy
right.
has got positive things in his life. I am only going to bring negative into his life. Then, you know.
So
I
you
know.
you have
Also,
shown
you
me.
could have spoken with him, and it wouldn't
Right.
have been disruptive this way. Like, you know.
Yeah, I was just his friend. I was just helping him out. I mean, whatever. I was an older man. I wasn't even his friend. I was like his fucking grandfather. That's the truth. Like we were friends, but I was an older person giving him advice about what to do in university at this very like, you know, whatever. You know, and again, you really changed that. The nature of my friendship was forced to change because of your relationship
and I
and the
know,
disasters that ensued.
You've spoken with him, and he was hoping that I could be a mentor of some kind, and he
Yeah.
was very misguided in thinking that, because although I may have put out a certain kind of
You were an older woman trying to fuck him, period. And that was from day one. Look, I just want to ask you, if positions were reversed, how would you feel if you found on my hard drive the folders and files that you wrote about this kid that are on your hard drive? What if it was a 18-year-old woman, 18, 19, 20, 21, where for all those years, I'm sorry to use the term, but I was cyber stalking a younger woman, like obsessing over if I had done that. And then if you saw the evidence of that marriage, what would you think about me? What kind of marriage would you have to be like? What future would you have me if you knew that I'd done that with just one girl? And in your case, you've done this repeatedly with several men. The other's not so young, but yeah.
I would think this is a serious problem. This is something that I have to constantly be monitoring this person to try to stop any of this happening ever again. And I don't want you to be in that position with me. I want to confidently tell you that I will never do this again. But, you know, we've had warnings from
It's kind of too late. You've already...
Yeah, I know.
All of these things you've done so many times already.
Exactly. And we've had warnings from people who can examine my behavior and see it from their own perspective with their addiction struggles. And they say to me, like, look, if it's not this, it's going to be something else. So you have to be vigilant and on guard for that. And yeah, I understand how I have no credibility anymore. And how, I mean, if you
like
if you
the
kill
tragedy.
somebody's cat and you say, oh, sorry, I'll never do that again. Well,
Right.
that doesn't mean anything, and that doesn't help what you actually did, which was killing somebody's cat. So
The tragedy is what you wanted wasn't evil. You wanted love, you wanted respect, you wanted intellectual colleagues, you wanted to lead the life of the mind, and you didn't want to do it alone. You know? You had these interests in politics and history and study of languages, including Chinese, but not only Chinese. You had this yearning to lead a more meaningful life, and you didn't want to do it alone. And that's so positive and that's so good. But the way you went about it, what you did with those desires, was really sick and twisted and evil. And it's had a terrible effect on your life, on my life, and on this kid's life, you know, who's now in his early 20s. This could have a huge impact on him for the rest of his life. His idol, this YouTuber he followed since he was 14 years old, he was now dragged into this sordid, middle-aged mess through the bizarre sexual obsession of, you know, Aisel Mazard's girlfriend, who, you know, during these years was 29, 30, 31. This older woman who, you know, basically took advantage of his naivete and good intentions. This kid, from his perspective, was having a kind of book reading club and language learning club. He's, from his perspective, this is totally non-sexual. Now, again, if genders were reversed, if it had been me as an older man and I'm spending so many hours with an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old female, nobody is, even if she were ugly, nobody would doubt what it was about. Everyone would know what's on the table. Everyone knows what's going down.
yeah, and it goes against what I, for many years, was trying to fight against, that, you know, the double standard with men and women, that, you know, you should, if you
Right.
respect women, if you care about women, you should hold them to the same standards that you would for a man. And I was not doing that.